Cruise ship workers of Reddit, what was the biggest oh crap moment on the boat that luckily passengers didn't find out about at all? One time I was on a cruise, and a few cabins down a man and woman who were cheating on their wife and husband, respectively, got super drunk and fell over the edge of their balcony from really high up. It was at night too. The whole cruise ship stopped once it was reported and it took like an entire day to search for them. Apparently the man had his jeans or something because he had inflated them somehow and they were floating holding them. They reported that they were stung by multiple jellyfish and were super cold the whole time. That must have been the scariest, most terrible 18 hours of their lives. Whoa, it's so smart that he inflated his jeans. Water pipe burst in a storeroom and soaked all of the spare toilet paper. This was on day 2 of a 14-day voyage to Antarctica. The cabin stewards had to swap around rolls of paper between low-use and high-use guest cabins and it came right down the wire. None of the guests found out or realized. Now toilet paper is hidden in every cabin instead of a centralized location. The day I learned that there was an optimal storage pattern for toilet paper on a ship. Ship just arrived in Witter, Alaska, the port for Anchorage, and an elderly passenger dropped dead while walking down the gangway. A conflict ensues between the port security and the ship's medical team. The port security didn't want the ship's medical team to get involved because it technically happened off the ship and the local authorities had jurisdiction. There really was no saving the guy, but the ship's medical team at least wanted to try, but the local authorities wouldn't even allow the chief medical officer to start CPR. The coroner had a 6-hour ETA, so the port authorities bagged up the body and stuffed it in an X-ray machine storage container in port, guarded by local police, until the coroner could arrive to take the body to Anchorage. The wife of the deceased continued on to finish the vacation for the 7-day rail trip to Denali. It was a 14-day gimmick, 7 days at sea, 7-day scenic rail trip. My understanding was the cruise line camped her entire vacation, arranged for the remains to be returned home at no cost to her, and provided a personal escort assistant for the remainder of her vacation. I used to be a crew member, and one time a guy working at the front desk jumped overboard after a crew party. He was found a few hours later by the Coast Guard, and everybody was asked to be discreet in order to keep the cruise running smooth. And everything was fine until the captain came on the PA and said we were delayed because a crew member jumped overboard. Then the madness begins. Rumors appear out of nowhere, and the rest of the cruise was pretty much guests asking what happened the whole time. A lot of crap happens on board. I could write a book, maybe even more than one. Another time a guy committed suicide in his cabin, and his family was on board, including a little girl, but this time it didn't leak to the guests. I saw the family as they were being escorted to the security office. Felt so bad for them. A friend of mine got fired for getting wasted, got pee and starting peeing all over his cabin while the security guys were there to take care of him. He spent the night in the little jail on board before being dumped the next day in whatever port we were. Also, every time we had ice cream at the crew restaurant, people would say it was because they had to empty the freezer to put a dead body. My oh crap moment was when I was hired for a ship on 2-day notice, trombone player. When I got on the ship I found out that I was replacing a guy who had just died in a jet skiing accident in Nicaragua. Everyone in the crew knew it, and the last cruise's passenger knew it, and the entire band that I was joining was obviously traumatized. In the end, it ended up being my favorite contract, but the first few weeks were difficult for everyone. RIP Bone Guy, I never knew you, but I know they all loved you. I provide software and services for most of the major cruise lines and spend a lot of time cruising. On the new builds is when you see a lot of crazy stuff happening. When a brand new ship is built they have to go through what's called sea trials. This is a full systems check for multiple reasons. Biggest ones being safety, emissions, and engine navigation testing. This happens without passengers, and a lot of stuff breaks usually. They will list the ship, lean it all the way to one side, as hard as they can and hold position while doing a circle or figure 8 pattern in the water. I had a 600-pound wine cooler, fully stocked, full face down about 12 inches away from me while installing a PC at a bar. It sounded like a stick or dynamite exploding from the pressure of all the bottles hitting and simultaneously breaking. I froze staring at it, and as I started to come out of the initial shock, 4 security crew members came running around the corner, no one else around except me and about $10K in broken wine, and the cooler wasn't cheap either. I just stuck my hands in the air and slowly exited the scene. I'm pretty sure if I was standing 1 foot to the right it wouldn't have been pretty for me. Found out the yard workers forgot to bolt it down, as per protocol. Oops. One story that comes to mind with passengers, travel agents and family, was the first sailing out of the yard. The ship can hold about 4,500 passengers. She's a big girl and has 5 or 6 massive engines to power it. About 3 hours into the sail away I heard a loud thump and massive vibrations all around. I was in an empty restaurant and saw plates and cups crashing to the ground from the vibrations. My first thought is to always see how the crew reacts. If they are calm, you can stay calm. If they freak out, you better start moving. I could see some concern but they continued on with their business. So I followed their lead and continued doing my work too. About 3-4 hours after that another loud thump and even more vibrations. Then silence. After speaking with a few crew members, found out we lost 2 engines on the initial incident, and now we just lost the rest. Whatever the reason was, we lost complete propulsion and this beast of a ship was going to go wherever the ocean wanted it to. Passengers were notified that we will be running late but to continue having fun and drinks were on the house. No other info was given. Smart to avoid panic. About 12 hours later a helicopter was seen, early AM hours, above us dropping down crates of engine parts, and a short time after that, we had propulsion again, and passengers had no idea why we were delayed and didn't seem to care. If I am on a ship and here it will be a while and drinks are on the house, I am grabbing my crap and heading towards lifeboats. Somebody shot at the navigation bridge of the ship from the shore on my last ship. The bullet bounced off and hit my colleague on the hand. No real damage but it scares the heck out of her. Ended up going home for a few weeks. While we waited for the local police to come on and investigate and take statements, guests were told we were delaying the departure to take on fresh water. I'm still shocked that never leaked out. I never had to deal with it myself, but the ship I worked on actually had protocols in place if modern day pirates attacked. We had some kind of sonic noise weapon and could also use our fire hoses. I was told that pirates were not unheard of in the area around Shanghai. All of the computer systems run on Windows 7, including all of the automation and the machinery space, security system, fire detection system, etc. When Windows updates it will restart the computers, as it does with a normal desktop. Unfortunately it can also take out every computer at the same time and we're flying blind until it finishes. People may be more worried to hear that there is a hole in the hull, yet they're actually fairly common occurrences in older ships and easily plugged. Fires happen occasionally. The most terrifying was a crankcase explosion. The fire suppression systems are good at extinguishing them quickly enough though, so they're not even a concern to the crew, unless Windows is updating at the time. A crankcase explosion doesn't mean the engine is in pieces. Oil mist inside the crankcase explodes and the resulting blast is pushed out through the blast doors. Also, the fire suppression system is independent. That was a joke. The monitoring system is Windows based and just means we can't see what sensors or which sprinklers have been activated. The speed and fueling controls on an engine are mechanical and the local control is pneumatic, so keeping it running isn't a concern. All of the auxiliary systems are controlled by the computer system and are passed into local control and controlled by the watchkeeper if and when it occurs. Holy crap, the thought of Windows updates over a satellite internet connection is absolutely terrifying. There are small fires in places like the kitchens that happen somewhat regularly. Most of the time they're controlled quickly and no one even knows they happened. People drop dead all the time, especially on some of the nicer lines that are basically floating retirement homes. Ironically, it's when there's a survivable medical emergency that guests become aware of it, when they need to do an emergency evacuation either by tender boat or helicopter. One of the ships I worked on, a guest jumped off an open deck while we were at sea. He survived though. I think he was super drunk more than he was suicidal. Norovirus outbreaks happen regularly. Farter a literal oh crap moment for some people. Probably the worst accident that happened during my tenure was when a kid literally put his eye out on a ball valve handle on one of the open decks. Pretty sure word spread quickly on that one though. Sorry to disappoint everyone, but I don't know you too, Tsunami. I'm sure similar things have happened before. There's hundreds of thousands of people cruising at any given moment, and many of them are getting crap-faced. I worked on a ship almost 15 years ago. Many stories. This happened to a friend of mine. A family came on. They had a teenage son who was not interested in the cruise. As soon as the family got to their room, he jumped off his balcony, which is insanely dangerous. They fished him out, and the family got kicked off the ship. Another fact, there is a small jail-like area called a brig. On my ship it was on the crew floor, and it had a one-way mirror. Usually it was used for drunk or disruptive passengers. We once had an entertainer find out his ex was coming on the ship. That made him a little stabby, so they put him in the brig until the next port. A little stabby, haha. I was playing a production show, guitar, was standing on stage with a wireless unit alone to play Purple Rain, and then all of a sudden the house lights came on and the curtains closed. Everyone in the audience looked at me, and I ran off the stage. Turns out a sewage pipe burst backstage and there was crap everywhere. Show was cancelled and the passengers didn't find out why. Hey, we had to show stop in the middle of Purple Rain, too, because a dancer fell off the rotating motorcycle and hit his head and blacked out. Real fun. We were sailing from Hawaii to San Francisco to dry dock and make repairs to our ship when a propeller crapped out a day and a half into what should have only been 7 days at sea, so it added a day and a half to the voyage. People were panicking. Everyone thought we were going to run out of food, until the captain reminded everyone we had enough food for a month at sea, and if it was any longer, some perishables might spoil, but they could fly in supplies in an emergency if needed. We arrived in San Francisco with no more delays. Anticlimactic, I know. On a side note, watching a giant cruise ship getting lifted out of the water to dry dock is surreal as heck. Also, sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge and looking up from the 13th deck was super surreal. I was hoping the whole time we were going to clear it. It was probably only about 50 feet above my head. I've always wanted to watch a huge ship get dry docked. I run a shipyard, but my Travelift max is out at only 60 tons. Even 100,000 pounds boats look so much larger out of water. I can't imagine a ship of the magnitude you're describing. Well, all the passengers found out, but on a QM2 transatlantic crossing one of the kitchen staff got drunk one night and hurled himself overboard in the North Atlantic. The ship basically found out the next morning when the first mate kept calling on the ship-wide intercom for him to go to his post. That afternoon, the captain announced what happened and that the ship was turning around to, with the help of 3 nearby merchant ships, try to search for him. Of course it was foggy as heck and you couldn't see 100 but just about everyone was on the railings with binoculars trying to search for the poor guy. A wedding even stopped on board, the whole party out looking once the announcement came that we were in the search area. After, shockingly, nothing was found, the concierge desk set up a multinational currency donation box to send to his family back in Chile. There were 4 days left in the trip at that point and every day that box was stuffed to capacity. I hope it helped them. Was a passenger who found out. I was on the Costa Serena in January 2012, just cruising around the Mediterranean. Woke up one morning and all of the crew and wait staff at breakfast were stone cold and depressed looking. They made us do an extra lifeboat drill that morning, to all of our confusion. Found out later that day that our sister ship, the Concordia, sank overnight but didn't have many other details. My now wife wasn't on the trip and didn't know the exact name of the ship I was on, and found out before us. She was terrified till the next morning when I could get onto the ship's internet connected computer. We also found out the crew was especially depressed because a lot of them had family on the other ship and very little information. Took a few days, but things got back to fairly normal. I just remembered doing lifeboat drills and thinking they were a waste of time. Learned that lesson. Umariskul reminded me about the extra lifeboat drill. Added that detail. I work on cargo ships but I've trained with cruise ship workers so I've heard a few stories. I read your comment below and generally the news only picks up on accidents on ships if it's a major accident involving a lot of people. So pretty much only cruise ships and luckily besides the Costa Concordia it's pretty rare these days. I do know that they have codes when speaking about incidents though so to not alarm passengers. For example if someone is hurt dead. Quite common. If you have a heart attack at sea then your chances suck. and they need to call for help via tannoy, they will use a code so the passengers don't know what they are talking about. Also, as someone else mentioned, certain cruise companies that attract older passengers have a separate fridge for bodies because getting through a trip without a death is not so common. Celebasi I was star code for medical, Oscar for man overboard, and Bravo for fire. My buddy is right next to me. We work on boats together, but he used to work on a cruise ship. This is what he says. I have plenty of oh crap moments, but I'll give you my biggest oh crap moment. So we were stuck in the locks of Amsterdam for over 4 hours and no indication of what's going on. After a few HRS had passed, the captain came on the PA system, and the reason we didn't leave was because there was a live mine from World War II 1 kilometer from the front of the ship. Sorry, I'm on mobile and had to condense the dialogue. Who do you even call for something like that? Hey foreign country, we have a frickin' floating death pod ahead of us. Fires. I worked on a cruise ship for 2.5 years and we had 3 major fires. They were all in crew areas and were controlled and extinguished by our awesome fire team. The passengers never knew what happened, only that their waiter had to leave in the middle of dinner service. People don't realize how much training the crew members go through to handle these situations, and they will never know that their waiter just helped save the whole goddamn ship. Probably not going to get a lot of answers. I know at least Carnival makes their employees pay for internet. I was talking with some crew and they were asking about current events and politics because they are almost cut off because of how expensive the internet access is. They do. It is cheaper than what the guests pay, but it's also super slow and they charge by the minute. This is why if you ever go on a cruise, you'll see whatever coffee shop is closest to the dock full of crew members on their laptops. I currently work for a cruise line on shore. I have assisted people who want to bury their loved ones at sea. Obviously, the bodies have to have been cremated and the ashes have to be in a biodegradable container. My buddy worked in the theater on a cruise ship and always had fun stories from traveling around. Cool thing, beers are less than $1 in the crew bar. Bad thing, you always have to be sober enough to operate a lifeboat and man your station during an emergency. Crew members getting left in countries because they were off getting drunk and chasing cute locals. Old people dying and being put in a freezer on a low deck near one of their storage areas. Good times. A new guy miscalculated the pool treatment and one of the jacuzzis ended up with a pH less than 2. It was discovered before the area opened and that one remained netted for the rest of the day while it was balanced. A wiper painter stood on a small cupronickel black water pipe to reach higher on the bulkhead. Literal oh crap moment, from the floor to his knees. If you're pushing 140 revs on the shaft and the ship still won't break 15 knots, check the bulbous bow for whales. A pipe burst and flooded the kitchens. It was a waste pipe, so we had to throw everything out and get a sanitation company to meet us at our next port and go out and buy all the new inventory. We gave out vouchers for food, but if we had been further from port that would have been awful. Can confirm everything here so far. Dead people, missing persons, suicides, crew and passengers busted drug muling, wild crew parties with 60-cent beers and $1 pack of smokes. So much sea, group sex, etc. Breaking the crew packs, mingling rules all the time. Fires, man overboards, medical emergencies, helipad evacs. They use codes. Oscar equals man overboard. Bravo, fire. Star code equals medical emergency. Equipment fails where you drift for an extra day or two. Sometimes blamed on ports or weather, other times they are honest. Storms and rough seas. Bath bags everywhere and bouncing off walls. Boat drills. Crew and passengers. Twice per week. Heck, so many. I'll try and think of more. AMA if you want. Source. See username. Did 5 years in shipboard casinos with Celebrity Royal Caribbean. I went on a cruise once. There was an infestation of lice and I got off at the first port and flew home. Carnival fully reimbursed me. A passenger went missing and nobody could find him for a couple days. It turns out he committed suicide in the fan room, so everyone had been sucking dead guy air for a while. We definitely kept that one under wraps. That's the only one that the crew kept secret, but I have some crazy funny stories about working on ships. I was a musician and one time a guest ent, a fly-on act who joins the ship for a cruise to perform one show. Thought he was freaking Freddie Mercury and threw out his digipack CDs like ninja stars into a completely dark house. It ended up clocking some old woman a half an inch below the eye and she had to go to medical. The husband wrote the cruise director a very threatening letter basically saying my wife almost went blind, so I strongly suggest you give us a free steak dinner. I would usually be hungover, so I'd drink during the day to get over it. I'd go out in port and get smashed and come back. On turnaround days where a new group of passengers arrive, we have to take attendance and do a life jacket demonstration. I was so drunk one time I threw up in the stairwell as passengers were coming in. I somehow didn't get fired or even reprimanded, even though everything I puked up was straight liquid and smelled caustically like booze. We all have small cabins in close proximity to each other. We usually keep a spare key under our nameplates in case we lock ourselves out by accident. One night I woke up to a fellow musician who didn't have a shirt on pee into my wastebasket in the corner. He was so drunk he thought my cabin was his and he got the key from behind the nameplate and just decided to pee into the closest hole. As long as it was in the 80s or earlier, if he thought he was freaking Freddie Mercury, chances are he really was. That guy got around. We were on a family cruise and after a wonderful dinner we were trying to get back to our room. As we got to our floor and headed down the hallway, there was a new dead end. A wall had appeared that separated us from our room. We were told we had to go the opposite way and go around another hall on the other side of the boat. As we walked we noticed many new walls. Once we got to the other side the floor was wet and one of the new walls was leaking water from behind it. It took us 20 minutes to navigate the newly built out labyrinth. We were so worried we were taking on water we could barely sleep that night. I was a passenger and was shooting the crap with one of the crew members late at night. He told me that on an earlier cruise someone had died in a hot tub the first night out of port and people didn't know for hours. He managed to stay propped up and his sunglasses helped hide it. Several passengers entered the hot tub during the time and assumed he was antisocial for whatever reason. The crew discovered him when they were closing the pool area for the night. They moved the body downstairs to the morgue. None of the passengers except the guy's family found out about it. Bear with me, as the details of this are pretty fuzzy. I played in the show band for a ship once. We were in Belize and supposed to be back on the boat by 6 PM sharp. As we were leaving port at 6:30, most of the band is stumbling drunk back to the dock at about 5:30 when music director gets a call. MD, hello? As he's listening, his face drops, turns white, and then begins to boil red. MD, what the ever-loving frick? Don't say a goddamned word. I'm on my way. Before any of us can ask what happened, MD takes off in a full sprint out of the docking area. The band mostly tended to hang out together, but on this particular day, keyboard player wasn't with us. KP was a notorious partier, and often a pretty sloppy drunk and reckless. Not knowing how else to help, the rest of us boarded, went through security, and informed the security guys that MD just took off and neither he nor KP had made it back yet. We headed down to the crew bar for more drinks, and to wait out MD and KP. 6 o'clock came, then 6:30, then 6:40, and the ship hadn't moved yet. This was pretty strange, seeing as the crew waits for no one. If you're not boarded by 6, you're staying on your own. Finally, the ship starts to depart at 6:45, and we catch MD rolling into the crew bar. It turns out, KP tried to buy C from an undercover cop in Belize. Yeah, so MD went to the station, bailed his butt out, and they just walked. Again, I'm completely fuzzy on the details, but I do know that security, hotel operations, and the passengers never found out exactly why they were late, and KP stayed on ship every time we made port in Belize from then on. Oh, and he also paid for all of our drinks for a month. The band operated on a beer fine system after all. TLDR, keyboard player got busted in a foreign country trying to buy C, and held up the ship departure time by 10 minutes getting bailed out. Free Ike, that music director is a ride or die friend. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.